He survived the first atomic bomb ever dropped on a city. Then he went home and walked into the second one. Same man, 3 days apart, 2 atomic bombs, and he lived to be 93 years old. This is not a movie. This is not a legend. This happened. And almost nobody knows his name. Yamaguchi. And before this video is over, you will never forget it. August 6th, 1945, Hiroshima, Japan, 8:15 in the morning. A clear, warm summer day. People were walking to work. Children were heading to school. Street vendors were setting up their stalls. And somewhere above the clouds, a single plane carried a weapon that would change the world forever. Yamaguchi was 3 kilometers away when it detonated. 3 kilometers. And it nearly killed him anyway. But here's what nobody talks about. That wasn't even the worst day of his week. Forget the history books for a second. Forget the politics, forget the strategy, forget the military terminology. Just think about this man. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was 29 years old in the summer of 1945. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a general. He was an engineer, a draftsman for Mitsubishi. The kind of quiet, disciplined man who showed up to work on time, did his job carefully, and went home to his wife and infant son. He had been sent to Hiroshima on a business assignment, 3 months of work finalizing ship designs for the company. Routine, ordinary, boring even. And by August 6th, he was almost done. His bags were packed, his paperwork was finished, he was going home to Nagasaki, to Hisako, his wife, and their infant son. He was probably thinking about that moment, the front door, the smell of home, his wife's face when she saw him walk in. He never imagined that the next time he saw her face, his own would be covered in burns. Here's something the textbooks skip over entirely. Yamaguchi was walking to the shipyard that morning with 2 colleagues, Iwanaga and Sato. 3 ordinary men, 3 briefcases, 3 sets of plans to hand in before catching the train home. They were talking, maybe laughing. The morning was perfect. And then one of them realized Yamaguchi had forgotten something back at the office. So he turned around. He retraced his steps. He walked back across the city. That small, forgotten item, nobody even recorded what it was, placed him near the Mizohashi Bridge District at exactly the wrong moment. Or maybe the right one. That small detour, that one forgotten item, it would place him 3 kilometers from the hypocenter at exactly 8:15 in the morning. At 8:15 a.m., the sky turned white. Not bright, not sunny. White. Like the entire atmosphere had been replaced with light. Yamaguchi looked up. The shockwave hit him before he could process what he was seeing. It lifted him completely off his feet and threw him into a potato field. His left eardrum burst. His arms were scorched to the bone by thermal radiation moving at the speed of light. His vision went completely dark. When he opened his eyes, Hiroshima was gone. Not damaged, not burning. Gone. The city that had existed 60 seconds ago, 350,000 people, hospitals, schools, bridges, markets, was a flat, smoking ruin as far as he could see in every direction. Here's something that's hard to comprehend. The temperature at the center of that explosion exceeded 1 million degrees. Steel melted, concrete exploded. Human beings standing closest to the blast didn't burn, they were simply erased. Their shadows were the only thing left, scorched permanently on the walls behind them. And Yamaguchi, burned, bleeding, half death and barely conscious, was one of the lucky ones. He found his 2 colleagues in the rubble, all 3 alive. Together they crawled into a damaged shelter and waited out the night among hundreds of dying strangers, with no medicine, no doctors, no food, and no answers. He didn't sleep. He just kept thinking the same thought over and over. I need to get home. The next morning, Yamaguchi made a decision that probably saved his family's life, though he didn't know that yet. He was leaving Hiroshima. He was getting on a train. He was going home. The journey was unlike anything language can fully describe. The rail lines were barely functional. The carriages were packed with survivors, men, women, children, many with burns covering most of their bodies, arms outstretched to keep the raw flesh from touching anything, walking like ghosts through the wreckage of their city. Yamaguchi rode that train with his burns bandaged in strips of torn cloth. His face was swollen almost beyond recognition. He arrived in Nagasaki on August 8th. His wife didn't recognize him at the door. When she finally did, when she realized this burned, hollow-eyed man was her husband, she pulled him inside and held him without speaking. He had survived an atomic bomb. He was home. He was alive. For about 18 hours, the world felt almost normal again. But here's the part of the story that will genuinely keep you awake at night. While Yamaguchi was recovering in a Nagasaki hospital, while doctors were changing his bandages and treating his ruptured eardrum, the American military was already loading the second bomb onto a different plane. It had a different name, a different design, a slightly higher yield, and its backup target, if clouds obscured the primary, was Nagasaki. He had no idea. Nobody in Nagasaki had any idea. While that family held each other in a modest Nagasaki home, believing the worst was behind them, technicians on a Pacific island were preparing to prove them wrong. The bomb had a name. They called it Fat Man. Its yield was higher than the one that had destroyed Hiroshima, and its secondary target, if clouds blocked the primary city, was Nagasaki. August 9th, 1945. A city of 250,000 people woke up with no warning, no knowledge, no idea that somewhere above the clouds, history was already in motion. August 9th, 1945. Yamaguchi's burns were severe. He could barely move his arms. His hearing was damaged. He should have stayed home. He went to work anyway. That's the kind of man he was. He walked into the Mitsubishi offices in Nagasaki and sat across from his supervisor, a man who had not been in Hiroshima, who had not seen what Yamaguchi had seen, and he tried to explain what had happened. One bomb, he said, one single bomb. It destroyed the entire city. His supervisor stared at him. "That's impossible," he said. "You must be confused." Yamaguchi leaned forward. He was not confused. He had been there. He had walked out of it with his own legs. He had watched a city of 350,000 people simply stop existing in a single second. And he needed this man to understand that whatever Japan believed about the war, about its weapons, about its defenses, the room turned white. At 11:02 a.m., the bomb nicknamed Fat Man detonated above Nagasaki. Yamaguchi was thrown across the room for the second time in 3 days. His bandages were blasted from his body by the shock wave. The windows of the Mitsubishi building shattered inward. Fire rolled through the streets outside. He lay on the floor of that office, burned twice now, ears ringing, the air thick with smoke, and stared at the ceiling. The second atomic bomb had found him. 2 atomic bombs, 2 cities, 3 days. The same man had stood inside both of them, and he was still alive. His wife was outside when it hit. She had gone out to find burn ointment for his wounds, still trying to care for the man who'd survived the first bomb when the second one detonated. She grabbed their infant son and pressed herself against a hillside wall. The hills of Nagasaki saved them. Unlike flat Hiroshima, Nagasaki's terrain absorbed and redirected much of the blast. Hisako and the babies survived, but the city around them was devastated. 40,000 people killed instantly, tens of thousands more in the weeks and months that followed. The Urakami district, directly below the hypocenter, was completely obliterated. And Yamaguchi? He developed full radiation sickness, fever, vomiting. His hair fell out in clumps. His white blood cell count collapsed. His immune system was fighting a war it couldn't win. Doctors gave him almost no chance. He recovered anyway. Nobody could fully explain it. His distance from both blasts, roughly 3 kilometers each time, was critical. The concrete building in Nagasaki shielded him from direct thermal exposure. His age, his fitness, maybe something else. Maybe something science still hasn't named. But here is what I keep coming back to. He didn't just survive the blasts, he survived 65 more years. He raised children, he watched grandchildren grow. He outlived his burns, his radiation sickness, his grief, and nearly every person who had stood in either city on either of those mornings. Life went on, slowly, painfully, but it went on. For years, Yamaguchi said almost nothing. He went back to work at Mitsubishi. He raised his family. He lived quietly in Nagasaki the way a man lives quietly when he has seen things he cannot explain to anyone who wasn't there. But eventually, slowly, he began to speak. He testified before the United Nations. He sat across from politicians, scientists, journalists, and students. He spoke about what it smelled like, what it sounded like, what the faces of the dying looked like in the streets of both cities. He wasn't angry. He was precise, deliberate, devastating. "I can't understand," he said near the end of his life, "why the world cannot understand the pain of the nuclear bomb." In 2009, 64 years after both bombs, the Japanese government formally certified Tsutomu Yamaguchi as the only officially recognized survivor of both atomic bombings. A Niju Hibakusha, twice bombed. He was 93 years old. He died 4 months later, on January 4th, 2010. Stomach cancer, almost certainly caused by the radiation his body had absorbed across those 3 days in August 1945. He had carried those bombs inside him for 65 years, and he used every single one of those years to make sure we understood what he had survived and why it must never happen again. There were no medals, no monuments, no ticker tape parade, just one quiet man who survived the impossible twice, and then spent the rest of his life making sure the world never forgot what impossible actually looked like. His name was Tsutomu Yamaguchi, and now you'll never forget it either. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, America and WWII Stories, as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.